Welcome to the Lone Star State here in the US. That's right, I'm here in Austin, Texas. As you can see behind me, I've spent the last few days shooting with the Panasonic LUMIX S1 Mark II, a brand new camera and the brand new 24 to 60mm f2.8 zoom lens. So this is a bit of a two-in-one. I'm going to share with you plenty of different samples shot at different frame rates, resolutions, all that kind of stuff. And if you find the video helpful, please leave a thumbs up. A massive thanks to LUMIX for sponsoring this event and sending us out from Australia all the way to Austin, Texas. Just know I'm very objective in my reviews, and there's a few things that you need to know about this camera if you're thinking about maybe upgrading from the S5 Mark II or X, or if you're thinking about getting the S1R Mark II, and I'll cover all of that in this video. Now, if you saw my review of the S1R Mark II, this fixes a lot of the complaints when it comes to continuous video shooting, and I'll talk about that throughout the video because no one's got time for overheating. So far, so good. It's been hot and humid, but we'll talk more about that later. Before we get into this video, it should go without saying, this is a first look and preview at the LUMIX S1 Mark II, and not a full deep dive detailed review after weeks of hands-on experience. But odds are this video will be quite long. It may be a hodgepodge of stuff shot here in Austin, Texas, mixed with stuff shot back home in Melbourne, Australia. And then I'm going to do a follow-up deep dive tutorial menu system guide for new users of this camera. But overall, if you're a video shooter, I think this might be the camera to get. Let's get into it. While this video will focus on the S1 Mark II and the new 24 to 60mm f2.8 lens, there's also the S1 Mark II E. So that'll be the less expensive option over this. And I'll talk about that on a future video, comparing it not only to this camera, but also the S5 Mark II X that I'm shooting this with. Let's talk about the new headline features on the S1 Mark II. So we get a full frame 24.2 megapixel sensor here, which gives us a maximum recording resolution of 6K open gate with a 3:2 aspect ratio. This is 420 10-bit. Now we get plenty of other modes, including raw internal recording to the CF Express B card or out over to an SSD, which is excellent. This goes all the way up to 5.8K with a pixel-to-pixel readout. Much like the S1R Mark II, this will do 4K 50 and 60p completely uncropped, which is excellent. And we can now also shoot 4K up to 120 frames per second with about a 1.2 times crop or so, and the image quality looks absolutely beautiful. Speaking of slow-mo, this has some of the best looking slow motion I've ever seen, all the way up to HD at 240 frames per second, and I got to test this out extensively. And while the maximum slow motion does increase the crops and you're back to manual focus, the image quality itself looks far better than any of the other cameras I've tested in the range. And this puts it well ahead of the S1R Mark II because that was capped out at HD at 120 frames per second, or 4K at 120 frames per second. So 240p for slow-mo junkies, it's a real winner. I should also note that the MOV container on here has the most amount of codecs I've ever seen. It's crazy, and they've added so many new ones, including the new 2:1 aspect ratio. Now, this is part of the Cine scope listing within the camera, and this gives you a native super widescreen look that looks absolutely beautiful. I shot with this so much over the last couple of weeks, and I really love the aesthetics of this particular look. Now, you might be saying, hey, can't you just shoot in open gate and crop a 2:1 out of it? Absolutely, but this allows you to shoot up to 6K at 60p. So you have the advantage of not just being stuck at 30 frames per second. So if you like to work with the higher frame rates, you can use that new 2:1 aspect ratio. Real-time LUT, LUMIX Lab and LUMIX Flow are all supported on here. Now, I've covered that extensively on other videos, but just know if you like to create your own custom picture profiles or download others, you can install them directly on the camera and get some really creative looks. The S1 Mark II gives us excellent dynamic range. So there's two sort of modes, and the first one is just standard, which gives you 14 plus stops of dynamic range when shooting vlog. And then we get dynamic range boost, and this jacks the ISO up to 1000, but we get 15 plus stops of dynamic range, which is crazy. So if you like lots of flexibility and lots of dynamic range, you can turn dynamic range boost on. Just know though, it doesn't work in all modes. So some of them are capped at 30 frames per second, all that kind of stuff. So you've got to work around it. But if you are shooting a talking headshot, for example, in the standard frame rates, you can leave it on and get a little bit more dynamic range. Over to rolling shutter. Now, this is one of those things that can affect some people's style of shooting and not others. But for all of my tests so far, this is a much better camera overall, again, than the S1R Mark II, thanks to the lower megapixel sensor. Now, if you're shooting 4K, 24, 25, or 30p, I think the rolling shutter is fine. For what I do, it's not a problem, and I didn't notice it anytime I was shooting out in the field. Now shooting 4K 50 or 60, you get improved rolling shutter performance, which is excellent. So this is very comparable up against other cameras in my collection. I'll show you a quick example of the Sony ZV-E1, which has a lower megapixel sensor again, and arguably some of the best rolling shutter performance out there. And this is 4K at 30 frames per second. And now over to the LUMIX shooting 4K at 30 frames. Let's take a look at 60 frames per second on the ZV-E1 and 60 frames per second on the S1 Mark II. Now to my eye, looking at the footage on both of these cameras, the thing I noticed was how bad the Sony IBIS was. This isn't to ridicule that camera, but the IBIS is atrocious. And I noticed that far more than I did the rolling shutter. So you can be the judge of what's more important to you. Now there is one thing to make mention of. If you're shooting with dynamic range boost on, the rolling shutter is Jello City. So I don't recommend using that when shooting handheld if you're doing any sort of really fast action stuff. It will depend again on your style of shooting. But dynamic range boost, while it's a cool feature if you need a little bit more dynamic range, I much prefer just leaving it off. Kind of simplifies the menu and you get better rolling shutter performance. All right, let's talk a little bit now about overheating on this camera. So overall, this is much more reliable than the S1R Mark II, which I found completely unusable here in Australia over summer. Even in the studio, it was overheating. This is much better. In all of my practical tests outside in Austin, Texas, and in Australia, I've not seen the overheating warning message once, shooting in any mode. So that's awesome. Whether I'm shooting indoors or out, using it as per normal, it hasn't been a problem. Shooting 6K open gate, it was able to record until the media card completely filled up, which was great. No overheating warning message or anything like that, which was awesome. The second test I ran was 6K at 60 frames per second with that new 2:1 aspect ratio. And while I did see the overheating warning kick in at about the 30-minute mark, it continued to record until the card filled up, all the way to about 2 hours, which was awesome. Now I ran this test directly after the first. No cooling off period or anything. I just wanted to see how far I could push it. I ran the same test again and I changed the internal fan to Auto 1, which keeps the camera cool, or it emphasizes cooling. And I also took out the USB-C power delivery and it recorded for 1 hour and 28 minutes without shutting down. So again, this is a much more reliable camera than the S1R Mark II. While I ran all of these tests to a V90 SD card, I also have one of these. This is a CF Express Type B card, and this is on the non-approved list, I found out. So yeah, this heats the camera up enough to make it overheat in certain modes and not in others. At the end of the day, the takeaway is this: if you plan on shooting at 24, 25 or 30p, you shouldn't have any issues with overheating. The only time I did see it was shooting 6K at 60p or 5.9K at 60p indefinitely. So yeah, as long as that's not your use case, I don't think you'll have any problems. The audio capability of this camera is also very impressive. The standard 3.5mm audio socket can double as a line input as well. It works with shotgun mics, wireless packs, all that kind of stuff. And you can change the gain structure from standard to low and bring it all the way down to -18 dB. Maybe the star of the show with this camera when it comes to audio is it's compatible with the DMW XLR2 adapter, which gives you 32-bit float internal recording. If you don't know what this is, it essentially allows you to boost up quiet sections without introducing noise and bring down clipped audio to a manageable level so it sounds great. It's a really powerful tool, and if you're rocking the DMW XLR1 like this guy right here, it's also compatible, although you won't get 32-bit float. All right, let's talk about photography. There's a few modes in this camera I absolutely love, starting with handheld high resolution mode, which is this mode right here. And this allows you to capture a 96 megapixel image in camera without having to do any sort of post-production, and it looks stunning. Now, being that we've got a 24 megapixel sensor, it's still enough for most people, and I'm happy with that, but having that handheld high resolution mode is great if you travel and you want to capture a beautiful landscape, for example. I've been using this mode for years on my LUMIX cameras. It's great to see it included in this as well. Switching into electronic shutter mode, we can get 10 frames per second, blackout free, which is awesome, but the star of the show here is the electronic shutter. In this mode right here, we can shoot up to 70 frames per second, which is wild. While the buffer does take some time to clear and it only takes a few seconds to fill, it's really great having this sort of burst photography loaded into a hybrid camera. Now, if you're a sports or wildlife photographer, you can capture up to 1.5 seconds pre-burst, and I'll show you where this is in the menu. If you want to turn it on, it's a really great option. The photographic formats include JPEG, RAW and JPEG, and RAW, but there's also a brand new container here which allows you to switch between JPEG and HEIF. The big benefit of HEIF is its compression. It will actually use less storage space on your hard drives. Long term, this is a really great thing to have. When it comes to color science and color profiles, the S1 Mark II matches the S1R Mark II. So if you like this new Cine A2, which I'm shooting with right now, you get straight out of camera colors that look amazing. This is my new favorite color profile. I've been shooting with natural forever, and we've seen plenty of that in this video, but this looks great, and I plan on using this more when I get a camera that actually has it in my collection. It really does look good. And this is essentially Vlog, but with AARI color science, which is why it's called A. I had no idea what this profile was, other than I really like the look of it. And now I can appreciate it more. You get excellent dynamic range here, which is crazy. You can see I'm in the shade, but you can still see everything that's going on. And I don't have to grade this in post. It's really cool. How's this vantage point here? So I've got the city on one side. If I turn around this way, I've got the river. This is all done with auto exposure, aperture priority mode, and it's doing a really great job. And again, the color science, you can be the judge. Let us know what you think. Handling wise, this is exactly the same as the S1R Mark II. So we've got the same command dial on this side with the interaction between the photo, video, and S&Q mode over here. Both are locking, which is awesome, so you're not going to accidentally knock them out of place. Much like the S1R Mark II, we get a different position on the back wheel to that of the S5 Mark II and X, so if you've had a problem accidentally sort of knocking this with your thumb on the back of the camera, it shouldn't be as big of a problem with this. The grip is nice and large, so you've got plenty of space between your fingers and the lens, and this lens right here is slightly bigger than the 20-60 kit lens, so that's great. I've got ample space here. It's nice and comfortable to shoot with, which is awesome. If you watch my S1R Mark II review video, you know how much I like the brand new fully articulating touchscreen. It's a nice ergonomic experience when you're shooting behind the camera. You can have it tilted up like this or even away from the body, which really gives you great neck relief. You're not always looking to the left like this. Until you use it, you really don't know what you're missing out on. I love the one on the GH7, but this is actually better. So no problems in terms of the fully articulating touchscreen. Whether you're a photographer or videographer, I don't think you'll have too many complaints when it comes to this screen. It tilts in all the popular ways and then a few extras. Much like the S1R Mark II, we get a 5.76 million dot EVF. So if you're coming from an S5 Mark II and X, you will see a difference in resolution, which is great. Although the resolution on the flip screen looks identical, you'll definitely notice a difference if you like to use the eyepiece. Another reason this is a great option for video shooters is we get record buttons both on the front and top, along with tally lamps. Tally lamps are awesome. On the S5 Mark II X right now, I can only see I'm recording by looking at the selfie screen. On this, there's a tally lamp on the front to let you know that you're rolling. It's a lot easier to see outside in sort of challenging environments like this where it's really bright. This camera uses the same BLK22 battery that we found in basically all the prior Panasonic cameras of modern times. The great news is, unlike the S1R Mark II, which required the battery grip for certain modes, you can shoot in all modes just using the internal battery. All of our main ports are on the left here. We've got our HDMI and USB-C over here, headphone output and microphone in that can also be turned into a line in. Again, like the S1R Mark II, we've got a CF Express media card bay here and also a UHS-2 SD card slot. The S1 Mark II gives us a shutter curtain option. As you can see, it's currently down. If I power the camera on, it's now up. So you can activate this on or off. You don't have to use it, but if you want to use it, it's built into the camera. Another thing that's carried across from the S1R Mark II is the awesome in-body image stabilization system. So this is the standard IBIS without using any of the new e-stabilization modes. And as you can see, it looks great, but it gets even better. We get the new cropless mode, which doesn't crop in at all. We have enough resolution to give us 0 crops, but with way better corner stabilization. Now, this isn't as stable as the standard, but it's enough for most use case scenarios. So let's switch it over. Standard's by far my favorite e-stabilization mode. You get a small crop, but it gets rid of basically all the corner wobble, and it almost looks like it's on a gimbal. So this is awesome if you're doing any sort of handheld work, either behind the camera or if you like to vlog. And lastly, we're over to high e-stabilization, which does crop in quite a bit, but check this out. I can basically run with this and it almost looks like a GoPro. Now I can see the camera shaking. I'm not doing anything to help correct it, and it smooths it all out in camera. I don't have to run it through a separate secondary piece of software. This is all straight out of camera. Welcome to Miller Park. It's really early in the morning here. The sun's kind of coming through the overcast. We're going to talk a little bit now about autofocus and autofocus modes for video, and then we'll get over to photography. So this camera has all the same autofocus modes found in the S1R Mark II, but we get an additional one found under human tracking. We've got the same airplane, train, motorcycle, car, animal and human tracking options, but the third one now found in human tracking is urban sports. And the whole idea of this one is to find a human subject in the frame, whether they're breakdancing or doing something athletic, maybe not in a conventional position like this. We went down to a skate park to test out the new urban tracking mode, and in video it actually tracks really well. Whether someone's doing an air, a kickflip or whatever, it does a really great job at maintaining focus for video. But where it does really slip up is when you switch to burst photography mode, and that's when it really struggled. It was either fine or it missed focus completely. If you're unfamiliar with the mode, in the playback menu, it's called Magnify from AF Point, which allows you to go back through your photos and see exactly where the autofocus point was and what it was doing and where it was tracking. It's a really great feature, something I learned on this trip actually. And this allows you to see what's going on and what the camera is thinking about. And there were some clear examples of urban sport mode with the autofocus just completely missing the subject. While the urban sport mode worked great in video mode, at least in my samples, it doesn't work so well in photographic mode, at least not with burst photography. I hope they can refine that in the future, but it's a great new mode to have on this camera. The squirrel detection autofocus works a treat. Now, we don't have squirrels in Australia, and I gotta tell you, man, it really locks on. Even if there's branches and leaves in the way, it really does detect the subject fine. So yeah, if you're into doing this sort of stuff, it works great. I think one of the big reasons this camera will be extremely popular is the lack of compromise when it comes to its recording modes, but also its autofocus. You get full phase detection autofocus up to 4K at 120 frames per second. I did plenty of tests to test this out, and it looks to me like you get phase hybrid autofocus in all modes. Now, you do lose the tracking mode, shooting 4K at 120 frames per second, but you can set up a box, and the PDAF does an excellent job. One of the complaints I have with the S5 Mark II and X is when you went over to S&Q mode, it defaulted back to contrast DFD in certain modes, which has been really frustrating. So this has far less compromises if you're a video shooter. Let me give you my first impressions of the 24-60 f2.8 zoom lens. Now, this will tick a lot of boxes for folks who wanted a more compact 24-70, but without the 70. So it's great in that regard. It's about a third larger than that of the 20-60mm f3.5 to f5.6 kit lens. So if you can live with a little bit of extra barrel size with this, I think you're going to be in for a bit of a treat. Now, shooting photos and video with this has been awesome, and it's basically replaced the need for multiple lenses in my lineup. I'm more than happy shooting at f2.8 on full frame. I have no problems with that whatsoever. Sure, f1.8 or 1.4 can come in handy in certain situations, but thanks to the full frame sensor, I was testing this out in low light without any problems whatsoever. The zoom ring has a nice amount of tension on it. The focus ring feels fine. It works with the linear focusing options found in the camera. There's a manual focus autofocus switch on the side, and now a brand new custom function button. That's right, so you can program features of the camera to turn on and off as you so choose. And thanks to the hybrid zoom feature in this camera, you can punch so much further in for both photo and video. So yeah, this could be your one and done travel lens if you can live with a little bit of extra size. Unlike the rest of the S-series primes and of course the beloved 20-60mm kit lens, this has a 77mm front filter thread, and I only took 67s with me. So everything you've seen shot with this has just been straight out of camera with no ND filters or anything like that. Now, while this is a first impressions review of the camera and lens, I gotta say I'm really impressed with this. I do plan on testing it further when I get home, but I think the true test is using it out in the field and on location. Shooting test charts is boring. Sure, it shows you how sharp things are in the corners, but when I look at the photos, at least on my MacBook here, they look really sharp, so that's great. And I would have no problems using this for travel or any sort of pro work where f2.8 is ample. One of the cool things about this camera is it will work as a webcam. I've currently got it hooked up to my Mac Studio here, being recorded in Open Broadcaster software, and you're looking at 1080p at 30 frames per second. This will also go up to 1080p at 60 frames, and you can also drop it back to 720p at 30. And now I'm recording at 4K 15 frames per second. Well, I'm actually recording at 30 frames per second, but the camera will only output 15 frames per second. So this might look a little bit choppy, This is still usable in an interview situation, for example, but if you want the smoothest experience, 1080p 60 just looks better to my eye. I'd rather have smooth footage than choppy footage. Now, this whole plug and play experience is excellent. I just simply plugged it in, selected my frame rate, and I was good to go. The tally light is on the camera, letting me know that it's all working and doing its thing. It doesn't look like I can record or do anything while this is in webcam mode, which I don't think is a problem for most people. You can always capture on your computer or through Ecamm Live or whatever streaming service you use. But this is a great way for going live. Again, though, I would stick to 1080p at 30 or 60 frames per second for the best experience. You can, of course, still stream over Ethernet and Wi-Fi, so it has a lot of the same connectivity that we've seen with the S5 Mark IIX. Check out this funky table tennis table. It's got painted cows on it. Anyway, we're going to talk about low light performance, and this is solid throughout pretty much most of the range on the camera, up to about 12,800. After that, you'll see some noise kick in. Now, I tested this in both the natural picture profile, which is one of the standard ones, and also when shooting vlog, and there wasn't much of a difference in the end result. It looked clean up to 12,800. And just after that is where the noise started to creep in. You could probably push it a little bit further than that and add some noise reduction either in camera or in post-production. But yeah, I would have no problems using this camera to 12,800, as you can see from these examples. These were all shot using the new 24 to 60mm f2.8 zoom lens. All right, let's wrap this up. I'm gonna give you my first impressions review here of the LUMIX S1 Mark II. This has been an absolute pleasure to use. It really does feel in many ways like a full frame GH7 without the same user experience. You know, the command dials and options and all that kind of stuff makes it a very different camera to use, but it's still very similar in terms of not having too many trade-offs. Now, while 4K 120 definitely gives you a 1.2 times crop or so, the image quality coming off this sensor is stunning. It really is great. I love the color science, and that Cine-like A2 profile is definitely one of my new favorites. It's a really great camera, especially for shooting video. While we get a lower megapixel sensor than the S1R Mark II, I still think this is a fantastic camera for photography, and that handheld high resolution mode is always a pleasure to use. The burst photography rates are crazy on here as well, so you're getting a lot of value out of this camera for both photo and video. What really separates the S1 Mark II from something like a Sony FX3 or A7S III, both of which I previously owned, is the fact that we get an amazing in-body image stabilization system. It's class leading, and for a full frame camera to have essentially micro four thirds level of stabilization is insane. So they've done a great job with this in the prior releases also. We get the same connectivity with LUMIX Flow and LUMIX Lab, which is awesome, but we get all the great video tools, including anamorphic support, internal camera de-squeeze, vector scope, waveform, shutter angle, and about 12 pages of everything else. So there's plenty of tools in here if you're a filmmaker. I only have a few minor complaints with this camera when it comes to its usability. The first one is there's no 4K 120 frames per second in the S&Q option. You've got to go through the regular recording menu. Now, it's not a big deal to slow that down in post-production, and being able to do that gives you more flexibility. You can slow it down 50% or 25% on a 30p timeline, but there's no S&Q option. So if you want it slowed down in camera, the max frame rate there is 4K at 60 frames per second. The command dial on this camera really changes the way that you work with it, and it caught me by surprise a few times. So for example, say I'm using one of my custom modes outside like I am right now. I'm shooting in aperture priority mode here with this 24mm lens. I could switch to shutter priority mode just by hitting the Q button and then switching over, and I could start recording again with shutter priority. I can't really do that on this. So the way they've got it set up is you'll use this top dial PAS and M to cycle between the modes. But if you've got a custom mode set up in aperture priority mode, I can't find out how to change that to shutter priority mode. And if I do find that out, I'll share it with you on my walkthrough video of the menu system. But as it stands right now, this caught me by surprise a few times. Now you might be saying, can't you just go back to the movie mode? Well, you can't really do that. The movie mode is on the opposite side now, and it's separated with the S&Q and photo mode. So yeah, you've got to get used to how this works. And again, if there's a way of doing this, I'll share it with you in a future video. At the end of the day, the S1 Mark II is way more up my alley as a video first shooter, and I think if you're in that kind of situation, you're gonna get a kick out of this camera. It really was fun to use. Unfortunately, I have to send it back, but before I do, I'm gonna be comparing it up against this, the LUMIX S1 Mark IIe. So here they are side by side, and we'll talk more about this on the next video. A massive thanks again to LUMIX for flying us out to Austin. I hope this video has been helpful, folks. If you can, leave a thumbs up. I'll leave a pre-order link or buy link down in the description or pinned comment, and you can support the channel that way if you so choose. Thanks again. Catch you soon. See ya.